and welcome back to part 2 of the DIY Seamless Mame arcade machine project. I've selected a Dell Optiplex 745. This computer is no longer in use or needed by anyone, so I'm going to be using it in the arcade project here. I believe it has 3 gigs of RAM in there. We'll be reducing the amount of memory. I'll explain why later. But yeah, we have a basic 320 gig hard drive split into 2 partitions. A CD-ROM drive for the Windows XP installation that was needed. Now I've already gone ahead and installed XP on this, but what I'll show you today is sorting the ROMs and getting those ready for Mame and the Hyperspin interface. So let's get into it and we'll see you in a bit. Well, here we are, we're sitting in front of the Dell Optiplex 745 and I have XP Professional with Service Pack 3 installed. I also have Mozilla Firefox, ROM Center, and Hyperspin, which also includes Hyper HQ, or Headquarters. That's the program where we make all of our changes to Hyperspin and how it functions. But after we get that all installed, what we want to do is, because this is a Mame arcade machine, we don't need stuff like a serial port or a parallel port running. We just need basic hardware. And what we'll do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shut this computer off. And then when we turn it back on, I'm going to enter the BIOS, the basic in and out system. And we're going to make some changes there and turn some things on, turn some things off. Again, I have to apologize, I don't have any fancy ass capture software, or hardware I should say, to do this. You have to bear with me. So we enter the onboard devices menu. I'm done updating my drivers and downloading Hyperspin. So I'm going to shut off the integrated NIC, it's the network controller. We'll just go in here, I'm going to shut that to off. Now the computer doesn't have to worry about loading the network card. Integrated audio, obviously we want sound, so we're going to keep that on. USB controllers, we'll keep that on as well. Rear quad USB, sure, we'll leave that on. Rear dual, we'll leave that on. Front USB, we can shut that off. PCI slots. Well, I don't have anything in the PCI slots, so I can go ahead and shut those off. LPT port, that would be like your printer port. I'm going to go in there, we just select the off option. Sorry you can't see that, but every BIOS screen or for each computer is going to be different, so you just have to bear with me. You just have to go in and shut off all of these devices. That's off. UART power down is also off. We have a video option. Basically it asks you what your primary video card would be, whether it's on board or auto, which means if you have a graphics card in there, it will detect a monitor plugged into either the motherboard or the video card and select that device. Our primary video, we're just going to do on board, because that's all we're using. We're not adding a video card onto this machine. And that's another thing you want to keep in mind. You want a nice basic computer that has onboard video. because you don't want to have an expansion card sticking out after it's mounted in the arcade cabinet getting in the way. I will leave performance alone, security, we don't need any of this turned on. Power management. This is a fun one. So what we're going to do with the power management option, most computers have this where it's called AC recovery. It may be called something else on your motherboard, but basically it gives you the option, if you have a power failure and the computer's on, what does the computer do when the power comes back on? So we have three options here. We can have it set to when the computer is regenerated with power, when the power comes back on, it'll stay off. We can have it come back on, or we can have it do its last state. So if the power was off and we lose power to the house, when the power comes back on, the computer will stay off. If the computer is on and we lose power and the power comes back on, the computer will come on with the power. But what we want to do is we're going to put this on a switch that controls the whole arcade cabinet. So when we shut it off, it's like killing the power to the computer. When we turn it back on, we want that computer to come back on with our switch. So on this option here, when the AC power is restored after an AC power loss, we're going to set this to on. We want that to be on. And that's basically it. So the main things you want to do is the power management, AC recovery, you want that set to on. So when you lose power and it comes back, the computer comes on, because we're going to need that. And you need to disable all of the hardware that we don't need, like the serial ports, the parallel ports, the PCI ports on the motherboard, because we're using onboard video. So yeah, I know that was lengthy, but let's cut back to actually getting into Windows, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so we're back into XP. I just want to show you my file structure for my files. I have one hard drive in here, but I've partitioned it into two. There's all kinds of videos and explanations online on how that's done and why it should be done. The reason I did it is I'm not going to want to have multiple hard drives hanging around in an arcade cabinet, so I have one drive. I split it into two partitions. Drive C is just my Windows install, the drivers, and anything that Windows needs to run. Drive D is my Hyperspin installation, Mame, the emulator, and its ROMs that I'll be using, and XP HORM. Now what HORM means, H-O-R-M, it means hibernate once, resume many. Now what this will do for us is, normally if you hibernate without HORM installed and you lose power in the middle of your session, say you're browsing the web or you're in the middle of playing a game and all of a sudden the power goes out, when you turn the computer back on, the hibernation information is corrupt at that point, and it goes through the regular Windows boot routine again. Basically, you see the welcome screen and the loading of Windows. But what we want to do is we want a hibernation state that can't be corrupted. So what HORM does is, when we activate it, it takes our hibernation state that we were in and protects it. So what this means is, if the computer crashes or the power gets lost in the middle of us playing a game, when we resume power, when we turn it back on or the power comes back, the hibernation file will not be corrupt at that point. It'll still work, and it won't prompt us to fix the hibernation or boot from a fresh start, basically. Okay, with that said, that's why I split it up into two partitions here. Our C drive in our D drive. The C drive, once Horm's installed, this will be write protected and no changes can be made to this. But our D drive, even with C protected, we can make changes here, we can add files, we can remove files. This is important for future use, say if we want to add games or remove games. Any change that we make on D is fine. It's C that can't be touched, and this will be our hibernation state. Okay, so here is ROM Lister. This tool is extremely helpful when it comes to categorizing your ROMs. I use this for Mame, obviously, but what this does is I know that the Bad Dudes cabinet only has 2 player buttons and a joystick for each player. So if I were to go through my Mame ROMs and try to figure out what games had 2 buttons and a joystick, it would take forever. This program does that for us. In our settings menu here, you basically have your Mame list, your control XML, and your category version ini file. There are videos on this already and a lot of tutorials online, so I'm not really going to cover how to use the software. But once you're done sorting and you got the games set in here, what we can do is we can check which way the controllers move, and if it has 1 button, no buttons, or 16 buttons. So I know I have 2 buttons, and I have this little checkbox or less, so I want games that do have like 1 button, or games that don't have any buttons, just like a maze game or anything like that. And you can also pick that you don't want to have any clones in there, and it has to be playable. That would be nice. And I can also select Japan for a region and select not. So that means all games but not Japanese games. Or you can have that in there if you want. You can do any. And up here in categories allowed, you can go through, you can pick Ball and Paddle, Breakout. You can skip the mature, the casino ones if you want, if you don't want climbing games. So basically you just check off the games that you want for your cabinet. And then once you're done with that, you push go over here and it generates that list for you. And once that list is complete, you come back here and down towards the bottom you have a ROM scan, and basically this will generate a list beforehand on what you actually have for ROMs that are compatible with whatever version of Mame you're using. Like I said, there are tutorials on this already. I'm sure you can find it. I just don't want my videos to be extremely long. So once you're done that, we'll get into the main piece of software next that does organizing. This is ROM Center. I'm currently using version 3.7.1. When we start this up, normally you won't see these 2 things here. I've already created a data file from Mame, and I've added ROM files to this software. So basically, I'll give you a really quick rundown on how this works. You'll get this, you'll install it, you'll go to File, you'll pick New, and here you'll see Load Games List from an Emulator. Now what this does is Mame's able to do this for us. When we select this, we go in and we pick our Mame emulator from drive D. We select Mame and we push open. And what that does is Mame has the ability to generate a database of compatible games using a XML command, and it just outputs a list. And once that list is created, you go ahead and you add a ROM folder. Basically, you browse for a folder where your ROMs are. Go to Mame and we go to ROMs and we push OK, and that adds a folder into ROM Center. And then after that's done, it takes a while. As you can see down here, if I zoom in a little bit, it's just going to go through and load all of those ROMs in, and it takes some time depending on how many you have. Okay, so once you're done with all of that, sorry I'm not going to, show you all the steps on using ROM Lister or ROM Center, because that would take probably an hour or two to show you all of the functionality of that software. You can go online and find tutorials. There are plenty of them. There's video and written tutorials. That's what I did basically to figure out ROM Center and ROM Lister. With those two programs, I was able to sort my games out to 2-button games with a directional controller, or games that had less than 2 buttons and a directional controller. So once that's done, we install Hyperspin, and I'll show you the quick setup of Hyperspin using HyperHQ. Okay, so now HyperHQ, this is the interface for making your Hyperspin act the way you want it, basically. In the main settings here, we have single or multi-mode. We're just using Mame, so we're going to go in single mode, and then we're going to come up to, you can change the screen resolution, all that stuff. Again, this has a lot of tutorials as well, optimizers on what types of graphics you want, attract modes, sound options. This is where you can change the volume of the videos playing for the previews, the wheel volume itself, startup and exit. In startup and exit, we want to disable the exit ability, because we don't want them to be able to exit out of Hyperspin and get to the Windows interface. We want them to always be in Hyperspin or always be in Mame. So to do that, we just uncheck exit menu enabled. Nope, we don't want to do that. And then we're going to disable the exit Hyperspin enabled. That's gone. We don't have to care about these exit options here because we've disabled these ones here. And tools, there's this thing called LED blink. Basically, you can have like a loading light, or high score lights, all that fun stuff, but we're not going to be using that. It's quite a lot to Hyperspin. So then we go into wheel settings. We'll choose Mame, and here is where you select your executable path, basically where the Mame exe is located, and the ROM path where your games are located. The execution style, I just have normal. What normal will do is run Mame directly. Down here it shows you basically the command line each time you run a game. So with it set to normal, it's going to go to my D drive and select Mame and then the name of the ROM. If I did hyper launch, that uses the internal program to run Mame and the game. But I like just using the bare bones normal execution mode, so I think it seems to switch a little quicker when it's directly connected to the Mame exe and not through hyperlaunch. So once that is all set up, again, sorry, I'm not going to do a full tutorial on how Hyperspin works, but once that's also set up, we are ready to test our Hyperspin out. And what I did is I picked up, zoom out here and I'll be able to show you, hopefully. Turn on some lights. Okay, so I just picked up a pair of these Super Nintendo style USB controllers. They're super generic and they were probably, I think they were $5 each. I got a pair of these and I set these up with Mame, so adjusting the controls in the Mame menu itself and what buttons I wanted to do what with. And yeah, these were like $5 each and they work super duper. It's perfect for testing out our Hyperspin environment. I'll show you that next. Okay, so now that we have our controllers plugged in, we can go and configure the controllers through Mame. So I basically just ran the Mame exe by itself here. I'm using 0.139. It's somewhat of an older version, but it works just fine for what I'm using it for. So if we can come down to the bottom here to configure general inputs, we can change the interface buttons, players 1 through 8, and they have some other controls. We're just going to go into player 1, and it gives you a plethora of buttons and directions. So as you can see, hopefully, there is no up. Player 1 up is not assigned. So I just take my controller, I'm going to push enter on the keyboard and then my up button on the controller. And as you can see, that assigns buttons. It's nice and easy. And I have down here, I have my joystick 1 buttons. The button 3 and button 2 that you see here may be a little confusing because it says P1 button 1, that means player 1 button 1, is assigned to Joy 1 button 3. But really that's just these 2 buttons here, this one and this one. They just happen to come up as button 3 and button 2. So that's how I have them set here. And I also did the start button. All I need is the up, down, left, right, the 2 buttons, and the start button for player 1. As you can see, there are thousands of, not thousands, but hundreds of button combinations you can do here. So for the user interface, what I wanted to do is, in my first video I was explaining to you that I want to be able to press the first player start and the second player start buttons at the same time to kick out of the game, basically quit the game and get back to Hyperspin. And we can do that here where it says UI cancel, user interface cancel. So right now I'm just going to clear that out and show you how this works. Okay, so for UI cancel, I wanted to do, basically this is exiting out of your game. I wanted to press the player 1 start and the player 2 start to kick it back into Hyperspin. And how you do that is you quit your game. UI cancel does that, it quits the game. It shuts off Mame basically. And when that happens, we'll be brought back to Hyperspin. So for a button assignment here, I'll push enter so Mame is listening for some button presses on the controllers. And then I'm going to press start on both of these controllers at the same time. And now as you can see, Mame went ahead and it saw that I pressed those buttons at the same time. So now I have joystick 1 button 9 and joystick 2 button 9. So those have to be pressed at the same time to cancel out of Mame. Okay, now that I have the controllers all set up for Mame, got my buttons all assigned and everything, I'm going to crack open Hyperspin and just show you how the buttons work on exiting out of the game here. Now this is my Hyperspin as it looks now. We can use the player 1 joystick. Just select your different games. and the basically the ROM tools I used for sorting these out allowed me to check to see if they were complete ROMs and that they were functional, basically seeing if there was anything missing here. So just for the fun of it, we'll just start up Bad Dudes. So this is Bad Dudes. I've set up my my select button to basically be my coin input here, so I can add credits with my select button and press start for my one player start. Now all my controls are set up, I can play Bad Dudes. So when I want to exit Hyperspin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the start buttons on the 1 and 2 player controllers, and now we're back out to Hyperspin. And then we can just go and select games from here again and just, you know, keep playing games all day. And we can always exit out by pushing the 1 and 2 player start. So it makes it very handy. And select is my coins. So I'm going to basically wrap it up here. I'm going to apologize for the horrible filming. As I said earlier, I just have no way of capturing this properly because it's a very minimal old computer, and I'll be tossing it into a cabinet and setting up the buttons on that as well and hooking it up to the monitor. So yeah, let me just give you a brief recap on what we did today and what we're going to be doing in the future. So that just about wraps it up for part 2 of the DIY seamless Mame cabinet. Today I basically told you to find a computer that you don't need anymore, that has a little bit of muscle. It doesn't have to be a powerhouse because it's running older classic games. Get XP installed on that computer. You want to have buy a pair of these cheap controllers here. Get those set up with Mame. Get your ROM sorted with those applications I showed you. If there's enough requests for it, I may do separate videos on how to use that software to get your ROMs organized. But there are a lot of tutorials online for doing that already. But next we will cover XP Horm and basically installing our guts of the PC into the arcade cabinet and getting everything up and running and functioning properly. So yeah, stay tuned. We'll go over XP Horm, hibernate once and resume many, and I'll explain to you why that is very important for our seamless part of the arcade machine. So yeah, sorry about the shaky video. Next one will be better because we're going to be playing some games on the actual cabinet and it will be completed. So if there's anything I left out, or if there's some questions you need answered or comments, please leave them below. Contact me through Facebook if you want to, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.